get it, but the carbon tax does squat for the environment. Nothing. And here's why. Here's what you can tell your sister-in-law. And this is coming right from the mouth of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, en français. He said it years ago on this big talk radio show in Quebec called Tout le monde en parle, which basically roughly translated means the whole world speaking together, okay? And he said something to the effect of, you know what, even if we stopped doing everything in Canada, it wouldn't make a big dent in global emissions. True. It's also something that the numbers and the math show from the Parliamentary Budget Officer, that it wouldn't make a big dent in global emissions. Why? Well, because Canada produces about 1.5 or less % of global emissions. So even if we taxed all of these people in this room to death, we made sure nobody ever fired up their natural gas furnace one more time or dared buy a roast turkey ever again for their family in Canada, wouldn't make a dent in global emissions. The carbon tax could be $1 million, wouldn't make a dent in global emissions here in Canada. So why don't we do this smarter? Why don't we take our cleaner burning things like natural gas and sell them to a place like India? A place like India, which has between 200 and 300 million people in it who are burning wood scrap and animal dung every day. Imagine doing that. Imagine having to go out every morning, the crack of dawn, and foraging for your fuel to burn, to keep your family warm, and to cook your meals. That's what between instead of carbon taxing everybody into the poorhouse. I will very quickly point out, because it's such a depressing note, I don't want to dwell on it. Here in Canada, we are seeing record amounts of people saying they can't afford the basics. And there's three things I actually look for. One, there's a very frequent survey that is done where they phone people up and they say, how tight are you on your budget? Living paycheck to paycheck. More than 50% of Canadians, more than half of Canadians now say they are within $200 every single month of not being able to make the minimum payments on their bills. I'm not talking paying off your line of credit, just your minimum payments with between $200 between them and insolvency. That's also known as barely scraping by. That's half of Canada. Second, food bank demand. I always phone, every few months, I'll phone the food banks myself and say, what's it like for demand? And the numbers bear it out. We have record demand of Canadians who are now relying on food banks. And the stat that gets me worst, and I'm gonna try to keep it together, is they often say something like, we're seeing the highest increase in demand from working families. What that means is that parents who are holding down jobs are still depending on donated jars of peanut butter to feed their kids.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think the outcome of this doesn't just affect me and it doesn't just affect Chris, but it's going to affect every single Canadian. And I do have to kind of chuckle a little bit when I get these messages from people or tweets on Twitter about how they can't wait till I go to jail and I should be in prison. And I mean, that is the single-mindedness, like that narrow-mindedness, because with one change of the government then, it could be you. So be careful what you wish for, right? There is actually a protester in Ottawa that was found out that wanted us in jail, and now she's in jail. So, I mean, it goes both ways.
Anyone who's walking in and out of the courtroom, you know, Ezra's been through this too. She has been absolutely vile, but the tables have actually turned and she's sitting in remand right now, which is unfortunate, but still, it does go both ways. So.
And I think, you know, we have to definitely talk about Coots Boys. I think that was incredibly shocking, for me anyways, but, you know, I've talked to Tony, you've talked to Tony, and the one thing that I will say, I think I've only talked to Chris, the other Chris on the phone one time, Carter, but Tony and I talk, you know, whenever we can, but he's just always so positive. and just so accepting of his situation and so spiritual about it and believes that, just like I believe for us, God's got our back. And they have their back too, and it's been really hard to watch these guys. I mean, I'm not going to sit up here and complain about spending 49 days in jail. Are you kidding me? Parquet was in jail for I think 150 days. These guys, and it just broke my heart when, because I thought, they might get bail and they'd finally see the light of day. And I'm going to tell you something about jail or remand. Where they are now is Disneyland compared to being in a remand. It's not a good place to be, and they were there for well over 2 years.
It's quite sad when I heard this last week on social media that for the first time in over 2 years that Tony and Chris got to put their feet on grass. They got to sleep in a bed with pillows and blankets, and they actually got to eat a meal because they're in the federal penitentiary now instead of the remand. They've been locked up in Calgary remand for so much time in the actual drug unit here with people trying to break them. It makes you sick at the horrors that these two have gone through.
But
Four, because there's two that were still in there.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, that just goes to show the resilience, and I can't speak for them and I can't speak for Chris. I can only speak for myself. But there was no chance in hell that I was going to let these people crush me. I've had police officers come up to me in jail, in remand, saying, don't give up and stay strong. And I'm like, I won't. I'm not going to. And people come up to me all the time, I don't know about you, and they say, I'm so sorry that you have to go through all this. And I say, don't.
Against the current. As you just explained, Montreal especially, it's a really radicalized city. It's a really leftist city. Not only we have a lot of radical leftists, but we are also radical Islamic. Recently they joined together, and it's kind of surprising because not long time ago, for the 1 million March for Children, those people were protesting against each other. They had like a big detestation for each other, and now they came together and they are currently destroying our city. Just last week, a group came, smashed all window of Concordia University, thrown Molotov cocktail to the police officer. This is the kind of people that I need to deal with every day. Not only I need to deal with it, but I need to hide from them. If one day they find where I live, I will need to move of place, because those people will never stop. They find out one of the freedom fighters that we have at home. They smash his car, his tire, and they beat him up outside of his apartment. They will go after you. They are not scared to be prosecuted because nobody is touching them. Our mayor, Valérie Plante, is on their side. The police are protecting them. 4 people have been arrested for smashing windows and throwing Molotov cocktail. They have been released without charge.
Released without charge.
Right now, we are waiting. They are identifying them. They are not sure if they are involved with the incident, so no charge have been given yet. But that proves you right now that there is 2-tier policing, and those people right now in the street who are destroying the entire place will not face charge. They will not face the law, as we saw with Tamar Lich, with the people we saw during the convoy, who are still now, 2 years after the Freedom Convoy, facing justice. And this is what we are living in right now.
Well, I'm grateful to you, and we are trying to help with bodyguards. I believe we have found a lawyer, Jacques Janson, who may be able to help. He's a very established senior man, and he believes that we have some legal remedies, and we must protect Alexa. And I'm grateful to you, and you have courage. Sometimes I think you have too much courage. Sometimes stay on the theme, but as I'm thinking about what Alexa's describing, and I don't mean to be negative. In fact, as soon as I'm done with this question, I'm going to brighten up a bit. But it is a fact that Canada's most notorious transgender extremist, Jonathan Yaniv, he's the guy who took all these immigrant women estheticians to the BC Human Rights Tribunal because he booked for a waxing under the name Jessica, but he shows up a bloke with his twig and berries and said, wax that. And if they didn't, he took them to the Human Rights Tribunal. This madman, everyone else is afraid of reporting on him. He meets every definition of a monster, and yet he's ignored by the regime media. You cover him. Does anyone else actually cover him? Why don't you talk a little bit about that and his atrocious vengeance campaign against you, which we will not abide?
Yes, well, what Ezra was describing has been since coined the wax my balls guy. So you might have heard of Jonathan Yaniv about that. I believe it started before my time with Rebel, around the 2018, 2019. And Rebel has been reporting on this individual and his menacing to society since then till now. And what is so absolutely remarkable in a bad way about that is this individual learned how to be vexatious in the courts and go after these immigrant women and that, but that he didn't stop there. So there are elderly people who fear this individual from interactions that he's had in homes. There are other mothers who say that they're being targeted and things like that. There is so much. In fact, our former colleague, Kian Bexty, as many of you know, was physically assaulted and attacked by Yaniv right in front of the Surrey Provincial Courthouse. And Yaniv was found guilty of that. In fact, he's been found guilty of 4 criminal offenses. The first 2 or 3, it was like you're saying, they get no actual criminal record. What this individual does is he claims to be a victim of transphobia. And that is how he gets away with doing so much to so many victims. And you won't even believe this, but part of the reason when the judges say, okay, she's been through so much, is they say, we want him to be able to go on with his dreams to become a lawyer. He's taking legal classes in university while all of these other people have been his victims. And so the latest is that he picked the wrong victim. He picked me.
Let's just talk about us being on the back foot, and we're not on the back foot. In both cases, we're leaning forward and we're moving forward, and we're doing our best with the support of our viewers. It's not cheap. It's not cheap to hire lawyers. It's not cheap to hire security, but we're going to do it. David, tell me some of the stuff you're working on, and focus on the. I don't want people here to think Rebel News equals bad news. Part of my job is to internalize the bad news, to be the liver of the organization, absorbing the bad stuff and dealing with it, so we can focus on telling the stories that we have to tell that no one else is telling. What have you been working on over the last while that you're proud of, that you want to maybe tell people a behind-the-scenes story about?
You know, I think that's a great phrase, Ezra, telling people the story that otherwise they're not going to get. And in August, late August, I went down to Windsor for a 2-day trial of someone called Cody Detremont, AKA Desiree Anderson. What happened is a year ago, this man said he identified as a female. I mean, if you are able to Google image that name, Cody Detremont, I mean, there's nothing even remotely female about him. And he got into a women's shelter in Windsor, and within a couple of days was charged with sexual assault. And his trial finally came up in August after more than a year of the charges being laid. And there's a couple of noteworthy things. The only other media there was a reporter from the CBC, which did not address the elephant in the room. Nor did the judge, nor did the Crown, which is this. How is it that a biological male, what did you call it, with his twigs and berries attached? How is it that this guy is in a woman's shelter preying on the most vulnerable of women imaginable? And you know, one thing I hate about, I think it goes back to the 80s when they took rape out of the criminal code and replaced it with the generic sexual assault. The details, if you believe the complainant, and I believe the complainant, it was a horrific rape. And yet nobody asked this fundamental question. The other thing that was sad, and I don't know if transgenderism plays a role in this or not, I can't read the judge's mind, but when she laid down the verdict, she's called the complainant credible. That's a good thing, credible. But she didn't find her reliable. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know what the nuance is here. I think credibility and reliability are one of the two descriptors of the same thing. So he got off. And by the way, we had gone down to Windsor last summer. We were looking for him. We wanted to scrum him on the street. This is another chilling part of the story. We went to the women's shelter and we didn't trespass. We were on the sidewalk. We weren't filming any of the clients. We were just using it for a backdrop. And two young 20-something female shelter workers came out and they started to become enraged with me and my camera woman because we were misgendering him. We were using the wrong pronoun. These are people that work at the they're females themselves. And by the way, the reason why we couldn't find him is that we found out, and I guess you're not allowed to bring this up in the trial, but in January of this year, he was charged, and because it broke his bail conditions, he's behind bars with 2 additional charges: assault causing bodily harm and assault choking. And apparently this information was kept from the judge. The final thing about this, which, the question arises, why wasn't all of Windsor's media there? Why wasn't the Windsor Star there? Why weren't the radio stations there? Because when this story first broke, it got worldwide attention. I think the Daily Mail in the UK did a story on it. Fox News did a story on it. But like I said, just this terrible CBC reporter in there not giving all the facts of the matter. Because the final, I guess, cherry on this sordid sundae is, like I said, he went from being a man to becoming a woman. So he went from Cody Detremont to Desiree Anderson. Sounds like a burlesque performer to me. And currently he's identifying as a cat. Right. How is this not newsworthy? How does this not speak about mental illness of this individual? I mean, you would think that, I don't know how the assault charges are going to go, but I would say for someone like that who has a propensity to violence and violence against the most vulnerable members of society, and you're a man, a woman, a cat, I don't know if it's a female or a male cat. I haven't gone so far down in the reeds that way. But you would think someone like that should be locked up for our protection and even his, hers, its. I don't know. I don't want to mispronoun them. But that is, I just bring this story up because if you relied on mainstream media, which would have been that one terrible CBC reporter, you would not have been given all the details I have given you. And I think this is, Ezra, the reason d'etre for Rebel News.
I thought you were going to give us an uplifting story, David.
Well, Well, the cat part is kind of funny,
part,
right?
You know, we've met some interesting people. You have repeatedly covered a protest by Heather Mason. They can just say that's called gender identity as opposed to gender expression. You got to know the terms. And if you are convicted of being a child molester or an atrocious sex crime, you're at risk in the men's prison for rough justice at the hands of the other prisoners, because there is some honor amongst thieves. And if you're a pedophile in prison, you may wind up dead. So why wouldn't a pedophile say, it's ma'am, be transferred to a women's prison, which, although I wouldn't want to be in any prison, a women's prison is less harsh than a men's prison. It's certainly less dangerous at the hands of the other prisoners, but more to the point, you have access to all the women now.
Yes.
And what I learned from Heather Mason that I did not know is that there are some prisons in Canada where children can be with their moms. If a mom of a young child is incarcerated, there's a program in at least one prison where their kids actually are it's more like a dorm than like a typical cell. But imagine allowing sexual predators to have access. And the thing that Heather Mason said is, if you complain in any way, if you don't use their fake names or their pronouns, you will be disciplined by the warden. You will lose privileges. Imagine being trapped in a prison and having this threat imposed upon you. That is what's happening in Canada right now. And I'm not saying this is never covered by other media. Do you remember the last time the CBC did a story about this? Have you even heard that about women in men's prisons? By the way, they can also choose to have their cavity searched and their body searched by a female guard if they identified as women. That's a fact too.
And you know, Ezra, to that point, I covered Heather Mason's demonstration at the Kitchener Federal Penitentiary for women, and for some reason the prison administration phoned the police on us, even though we're on a sidewalk. But you know, whether it's that, whether it's the trans cat, whether it's women's shelters at risk, women's sports are being destroyed in front of our very eyes. I mean, I'm in court with the rugby player Ash Davis, biological male, says he's a woman, plays against women, routinely injures them. And by the way, who cares what David Menzies or Ezra Vander or my colleagues have to say about that? World Rugby, the international governing body, was way ahead of this. More than 4 years ago, they put into their rules, no, this will not be tolerated. But in Canada, it's not only being tolerated, it's being celebrated. You know, one of the arrests you saw me was by the OPP charging me for trespassing for being at a public park. I wasn't interfering with the game. I was exactly where all the spectators were, and I was arrested for trespassing. But the real story is, and they told me this before, if you dare ask an impolite question, we're going to arrest you. So it's like extra special treatment. And I'll just close it on this. It's so insane.
Back to the diesel generators at their climate change conference, and then you ask too many questions, they don't let you in anymore. I've been to Israel 3 times, and if you want to know the birthplace of fake news directed at a people, it happened in Israel. Israel is not a place of apartheid unless you consider it's apartheid against the Jews, because there are places that they can't go, including their most holy places. But the mainstream media doesn't tell you that. But to shorten up all the things that I've been able to do, thanks to your support of Rebel News, I think the greatest thing that we did was liberating our province of Jason Kenney. And it was never my intention to be a critic of Jason Kenney. I was pro-unity, joining the Wild Rose to the PCs and then having the United Conservative Party, yup. That's how we got the NDP, it's being divided on the right. But what we do at Rebel News is hold the government to account on the people, even if we think they're our friends, especially if they're our friends, because we trust the conservative movement. I know Jason Kenney's gonna lie to me, or sorry, that's a big Freudian slip, Justin Trudeau. I know Justin Trudeau's gonna lie to me. I don't necessarily expect it from the conservatives, but when they do, we must hold them to account. And Jason Kenney could not write off our criticism of him, Mr. I don't even know what a vaccine passport is. And then you've got one and he's calling it a restriction exemptions program. We're not gonna have vaccine mandates. Oh, okay, but I have to tell my bartender my medical history before he pours me a draft. So when he did those things, he couldn't write off our criticism of him as, oh, it's just the CBC. You know how they hate conservatives. No, mister, I'm a conservative, lifelong. One of my earliest memories is my parents bashing Trudeau's dad at the kitchen table because times were tough. And so I think now we have this premier who is doing good things, but she puts a foot in the wrong direction. The first person she's going to hear from is not the CBC, it's going to be me. And so now we have a premier who is protecting your right to refuse a vaccine. Now we have a premier who is protecting our right to own a firearm. Now we have a premier who is entrenching our right to property in this country. We have a premier who is obligating herself to fight with Justin Trudeau at every step of the way the second he comes into provincial jurisdiction, encroaches. Thank you, Chris. So I think that's the best thing we did, was holding Jason Kenney to account. And that was only possible through you. And now we have this premier who's doing good things, but I think even she knows she goes in the wrong direction. She's gonna hear it from us, she's gonna hear it from me, and it is going to be honest, well-deserved criticism instead of just your standard Trudeau-funded, Trudeau-colonized hate on conservatives, because he's the guy who pays the bills.
Thanks, Sheila. Well, I'm looking at the clock on the wall.
Show like those wins that we need to celebrate. I mean, I hope obviously a Conservative Party is going to win, but even if not, this has been a huge win, because what it has shown is that just sticking in the middle isn't good enough, and that's what BC United was doing. I mean, in their leadership race, if you know anything who Aaron Dunn is, if you guys know who that is, they canceled him out of there, accused him of being racist. So that was sort of their first, hey, you guys are against free speech, but you're supposed to be this coalition party that is home for conservatives, the only home for conservatives as far as voting goes. And then they booted John Rustad out of the party, the now leader of the Conservative Party of BC. They booted him out, same thing, cancel culture, because he simply retweeted a tweet from the co-founder of Greenpeace that didn't align with the climate alarmism, and he refused to say sorry. He actually did a sarcastic apology, and they booted him out on his birthday. And now he is the leader of this party. So I think that is so exciting and so encouraging, especially in left coast BC. And all of that is because the Conservative Party, once they got their act together and rebranded, they went to the people. They went to the grassroots. They heard their stories, they heard their complaints, and they said, we are the party for you. And they shined and they rose and they cannibalized BC United, and now David Eby is running scared. So I am reporting on that, and Sheila will be joining me on Tuesday, on the 8th, if you want to tune into our live coverage of the debate. So yeah, I think it's
for the reminder.
Yeah, I think it's, for you guys, it will be around 5:30, but you can go to bcdecides.com for more about that. But I'm super excited about covering everything to do with the election right now.
That's great. Thank you, Ray. I feel a lot better now. Alexa, tell me what you're looking ahead at. I mean, you go on interesting journeys sometimes. You were in Mexico for the freedom-oriented conference there. Things are happening in Latin America. What are you looking at either at home in Canada, or is there something that's caught your eye? What doesn't have to be good news. What do you think is an important story in the year ahead?
First of all, I would love to be as excited as you for an election, but Quebec is going towards a wall into like a next referendum on sovereignty. I don't want to live in the next Cuba, so I'm going to live from my province if we are separating. Unfortunately, we don't have like election soon, but one topic that interests me the most is immigration. Right now, our immigration system is broken. Everybody think, oh, now everything is solved. Roxham Road is closed. It's not closed. There's still people crossing over. I just went back from a trip over there, and I spoke with the resident around the place, and they say, you know, at night, about 20 people are crossing in my land every day. Some people have told me, yeah, I found an abandoned car the other day, like in my field, like we don't know where that's come from. And the woman told me, you know, I used to put my house with like unlocked door and I have my kids there. But since Roxanne closed, I need to close my door because those people who are crossing right now, they are way more sketchy than before. They also told me that their neighbor went face to face with a migrant and was beat up by these 3 migrants. And another woman told me, oh yeah, 2 weeks ago, they were helicopter drone, RCMP everywhere, and the other side, because she can see the US side from her house, there were a lot of border patrol, and I asked them what's going on, and they say, oh, it's just like, you know, a routine. And she was like, I'm not stupid. Of course, there is something that's going on, but what is going on right now? It's gun smuggling, drug smuggling into our country. And now the people don't need now to pass by Roxham Road, they just take a flight. I'm coming into with a visa for tourism or for student, and afterwards I'm turning myself into refugee. Now all our money is being poured into organization as right now YMCA is now taking care of refugees to host them and to lodge them as fast as they enter into the country. They have free clothes, free food, free health care, dental care. I can like go on and go on. They have access to everything. And afterwards, it would be helped to have a lodging, probably a lodging that would cost less, while our tent cities are growing. Mental health issues is growing because there is no help for those people. And all the resources being turned into people who are not Canadian, while our Canadians are suffering, being abandoned on the side of the street with literally no help. I went the other day to try to give a little bit of food and try to talk with them, and their story is really, really sad. A lot of them started during COVID. They started to take drugs, and after that, they were spending all their money into drugs, lost their house, because if you have a property, sometimes you can be refused to go to therapy. And afterwards, but when you lose everything, you finish into a tent. And right now, for inclusivity, and you talked about it a little bit, and it's what I wanted to bring up. I called the shelter to know a little bit what's going on there. And I called the women's shelter because it's limited space for women in different kind of shelter. It's why they have specific shelter for women. But the women's shelter now have a really, really strict policy for inclusivity. So any man, he didn't take any hormone, didn't transition. If he just identify as a woman, he have his place into the shelter. They share room with women, they share bathroom with women. And for myself to have talked with some people in the street, there is ex-prisoner. There is people who have fetishes. I talked with a man who just told me like, oh yeah, I like to dress as a woman, and it's fine. Like if you don't invade woman's space, I have no problem with that. But now that women have already restricted place in shelter, and we know that we have more and more women in the street, where they're gonna go, and how we will make sure they are safe. This is what the immigration is doing to our country. And soon and ever, how are we gonna pay for all these newcomers that are pouring into our country? And guess what? There is American election soon. And if Donald Trump is going to win, those people who face deportation, who face their visa being revoked or anything, where are they gonna go? They will not go to Mexico. They're gonna go to Canada. And so I think like we'll not just have one Roxham Road. I think we will have multiple Roxham Road, a little bit everywhere. And let's go. And by the way, if the RCMP was doing really their job, why then it took me less than 24 hours to speak with 3 human trafficking online? 3 different human traffickers who offered me to traffic me for $5,000 without checking my background. Kids was okay and didn't check any of my bag if I had drugs or gun. This is Canada today.
Alexis, full of passion. She's a great reporter on the year ahead.
I'll keep it short and sweet, but I will ask you a favor. I'm going to need your prayers, an extra 6 hours in a day, and probably an extra day in the week. Let's call it Other Randy Day, because my job, I think, for the next 12 months, pretty much on the nose maybe, is to keep track of Justin Trudeau's many, many, many scandals. You know, we've got the Green Slush Fund where the Trudeau hand-selected, didn't even apply, head of the Green Slush Fund, Annette Verscheren, was giving money to her own companies. Like the gall of these people. Imagine you're Jean Chrétien right now. You're thinking about all the things you could have got away with. Then there's, of course, the unfolding scandal of Jasper National Park. We know the Liberals didn't do enough to clear out the pine beetle, but did you know they turned away private sector help from an Alberta company that was already on contract with the Alberta government to do mobile fire suppression? Did you know that the Conservatives were able to obtain emails that they denied to me, they being the Liberals, that show that they stopped mechanical clearing and prescribed burns for political optics reasons? Then there, of course, is McKinsey's getting favorable contracts. There's now Mark Carney in the mix, whispering in Justin Trudeau's ear as his de facto finance minister, while on the other side awaiting approval for a massive hedge fund from the government, getting around ethics rules that way. There's the Foreign Interference Commission. Did you know, well, you won't hear about it in the mainstream media, but David Morrison, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, he said what happened to Michael Chong, who was targeted for harassment and intimidation at the Toronto consulate. CSIS called it foreign interference, but the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs called it legitimate diplomacy. I'm sure I'm forgetting some. What else am I forgetting? What have I been doing? It's all day, every day. All I do is try to keep track of Justin Trudeau's scandals. There aren't enough hours in the day or days in the week, but I'll do my best to cover the things that the mainstream media wants to sweep under the rugs because they've got to keep the money flowing from Trudeau into their failing pockets. So that's what I'm going to do the next year.
All right, David, give us your thoughts on the year ahead. My goal for you is stay out of jail.
Well, somebody gave me 20 community chest and chance get out of jail free cards, which is tragic because A, it's not going to work, and B, someone is buying Monopoly sets. There's 20 Monopoly sets in Canada that don't have those cards in them.
And you've never been released from jail for free. It's very expensive to get David mentioned that.
Well, I'll try to be as brief as possible. And by the way, thank you all so much for coming out. I think the first thing I'm looking forward to, and it's going to be here before you know it, less than 35 days away, it's the U.S. federal election. I don't think, I mean, I'm kind of getting anxiety following the campaign. I don't really think I'm exaggerating when I say that this might be the most important federal U.S. election since the Civil War, since the 1860s. I really feel that strongly about it if there's not regime change in Washington. Now, as the saying goes, today cannot possibly dream what tomorrow may bring. But I will say, in the department of being a modern day Cassandra, that is you, Ezra. Ezra correctly predicted at the very beginning of this year, he said 2024 will be the year of censorship. And what have we seen? Bill C-11, C-18, C-63, and of course just less than 2 weeks ago, the NDP private members bill C-413. It's kind of the indigenous version of Bill C-63. It'll make it a crime to even question how many graves there are. We had Dr. Tom Flanagan talking about that earlier, and I guess the point is, I don't think we're going to see a fall election or a winter election, but maybe there's the potential for a spring election, and it all comes down to Jagmeet Singh. I can't remember the month. Is it February or March? It's February. That's when the pension kicks in. That's when he gets his $2 million plus paycheck for the length of that pension. Maybe then he will develop a spine and do the right thing. And really, the most recent polls, my goodness, it shows the Liberals in third party status. Ezra alluded to this earlier. A poll came out last month from 1968, the most hated prime minister in Canada, with 38% of the votes, Justin Trudeau. And to show you how bad that is, you know who number 2 was at 21%? No, not sure, right? So he's a clear runaway, a winner. My concern, whether it is a spring election or it goes all the way to the wall next October, and Ezra alluded to this, is Justin Trudeau going to be like a caged animal? Is he going to try to ramrod more censorious legislation through, and who knows what else? But I'm telling you, wherever I go, and I even speak to liberals, and when I say liberals, I'm talking about classical liberals. This isn't your father's liberal party, so to speak, to steal the old Oldsmobile tagline from General Motors. So many people are clamoring for change, and it's going to be exciting, and hopefully this prime minister, because I think he has a vindictive streak, he's not going to adopt some kind of scorched earth policy and create so many other problems for Pierre Poilievre to fix. I think the damage that's been done this last decade, I think it's going to take a generation to fix. I really do believe that. I'm not trying to bring you down, but it all begins with regime change in Ottawa, and it's going to be a thrilling ride, I should think.
Thank you, David. Well, my